Hey there everyone, it's Aurora, and now May has finally rolled upon us, and also Nationals are starting to roll up, or at least I think they do so late this month and early June, along with the World Championship. And so the format up until June is starting to very slowly settle itself in, even though there's not going to be any more big events to kind of help keep them together until about October with crap, I can't even remember what YCS it is, but I know there's a YCS in October. But for the rest of the time, there's just going to be regionals. There's going to be the Nat season, and then there's going to be, of course, the World Championship, which will nicely wrap up the dueling season of 2018 to 2019. And while the ban list has kind of affected the meta slightly, it hasn't changed too much, but it kind of bumps up some older decks, or some decks that had previously been hit, or have been hiding in the corners, waiting for Sky Striker to get that minor hit, or Danger to get that minor hit. And so, today I wanted to talk about my top 5 meta decks for the May 2019 format. Let's get right into it. Alright, so at the number 5 slot, I have True King Dinosaur. Now, I might be a bit biased since I personally do play True King Dinosaur, and I have found great success in this deck. It actually can do very well against most decks going first or second, even though the second turn approach is the approach that most of the variants take, other than maybe the Shaddoll variant, if you're going for a more control-based style with Winda. Or maybe even Construct too, but mostly Winda. You're not going to make a Construct going first. But there's so many builds of dinosaurs. I know I said True King dinosaurs, but there's a few variants. There's like a really weird pure dinosaur build, which doesn't play Lost World or anything. I think it plays World Dino Wrestling and Foolish Burial Goods. So you can search Pancratops. And then there's obviously the Lost World dinosaur variant, which is, in my opinion, probably the worst, because you're giving your opponent a free token, which is just link material. And yeah, just kind of dumb. And then there's obviously Shaddoll Dinosaur, as I also mentioned, and what I played before True King Dinosaur, which it takes advantages of, like, not advantages, it takes advantage of the Shaddoll monsters having effects when they're sent to the graveyard by card effect, which means getting hit off Tyranno and such. And then you have the Diagram True King build, because Dragonic Diagram works so well with most of the Dino cards. You have Coatlas to search a Pale, you have Baby Ceratosaurus and Petite Pteranodon in order to special summon a dino from deck. You got just so much you can do. Plus, with Miscellaneousaurus being at 3, which is the main reason why this deck is on this list, you can make your dinosaurs unaffected for most effects, other than like if your opponent Widow Wankers you during the battle phase, which really sucks. And that gets me to the downsides of the deck. It doesn't do too great against really back row heavy control decks, because there's not very many ways to negate back row or pop it, because unless you're siding Twin Twister, or if you want to summon a Coatlas, or even Logia works too, but those are only single negates, then you're kind of just boned. Because if you're playing against Striker, they're just going to take your stuff during the battle phase. If you're playing against something like Paleo, you go into the battle phase, they can Dino Miscus you, or they can Canadia you. It's funny, playing dinos, and instead of flipping stuff face down, you get your stuff face down. But speaking of flipping stuff face down, it's a great method to prevent your opponent from getting link material. And that caused me to almost beat an Orcus player at my locals, one of my good friends. He used to play Altergeist. He started playing Orcus now, and he summoned something off a Neospace connector, which it was the Aqua Dolphin, yeah. And I flipped both of them face down, and he just passed turn, because he just couldn't do anything. Because without their 2-card Nightmare Monster to make a Mermaid and go off, they couldn't do much. And the only reason I lost the match is because in Game 3, I accidentally flipped Harp Horror face down instead of waiting for the Neospace connector to hit. But anyways, this deck has amazing potential in the long run, especially if we hopefully get Lithosagum back at least 1. Please, Konami, it's not gonna do much. It's just banishing 3. Like, Zaborg sends up to 8. Like, how is that considered fair compared to Lithosagum? Especially if you end up banishing, like, Thunder Dragon shit, then they can just shuffle it back with Thunder Dragon Fusion. Like, it's not that hard to give us 1 Lithosagum, okay? Please. Thank you. Coming in right behind in spot number 4, or I should say right ahead, is Danger Thunder Dragon. So even with the hit to Dark Matter, this deck didn't really get slowed down at all. All it does is just misses 1 extra body on board, which really was just there to help send like a Goliath or something. You still have a Colossus on board, you still have Hot Red Dragon Archfiend Abyss on board, you're doing fairly well. Even if you're playing a normal Thunder Dragon build without all the dangers and negates and everything, you're still going to do really well. But adding the dangers and also the negates like Zombie Stein, Abyss, and all that, it just makes it even better going first, especially when your opponent can't even search things to get rid of them. So, unless they have like a Super Poly in hand, you're pretty set. Also, this deck pumps out bodies really fast and really big, so your opponent's gonna have a really, really hard time dealing with it. There's not much even to say about this deck other than it sets up negates and has big bodies. It's kind of a combination of just an OTK deck mixed with a control deck. And that's all. And at number 3, we have a rather budget deck with Salamangreat. Salamangreat is kind of a 50-50 thing for me. Sometimes I win against it, sometimes I lose against it, sometimes I contemplate why it even exists, because it's just so weird. And it's not actually a bad deck, nor is it an amazing deck. It's just kind of a nice middle ground. You have your negates, but you also have your combo-centric builds, kind of like a deck that I'm about to mention in our number 1 slot. Spoiler. But Salamangreat has some really nice recursion when it comes to getting back its combo pieces, and if you have your Roars and your Rages, as well as a Sunlight Wolf on board, you're pretty much set going first. If you go second, though, don't expect to see very good results unless you're using Super Poly or Fusion of Fire to make a Violet Chimera, because it's more of a control deck than anything, even though you can play an OTK build. At one point, I played a True King build, and I didn't get that great of results. But other than that, it's fine. It's really easy to build, really cheap. All you have to do is get 3 structure decks and then get some Sunlight Wolves, which shouldn't be hard since it is a rare in Savage Strike and it's super in the OTS packs. Sorry about not being able to speak. I just have not been gifted with that yet, even at my ripe young age at 15. But Salamangreat is always, or at least for now, until it gets a significant hit other than Lady Debug, going to be a good, solid budget pick. Especially if you just have $30 to spend, maybe 50. You can just slap the entire deck together really easily. Not much to say. You get negates, that's it. And with number 2, we have Sky Striker. You thought this was going to be number 1, didn't you? No, you're wrong. So, even though it was a minor hit, putting Kagari to 1, it severely cripples the deck more than a lot of people may think. Kagari, other than multi-roll, is the main piece of recursion from the graveyard in the deck, or I should say in the extra deck. And even though multi-roll can substitute for it fairly well, they can't just keep spamming Kagari over and over again to get their combo pieces back. And they only have 1 copy of the person that can run over just about everything. Because, yes, Shizuku lowers the attack of some things, but it doesn't let you push for damage quite as easily. Because Kagari just gains, and so it can run over several things, while Shizuku can only lower everything, but most of the things are probably going to be huge anyway. And really, other than Widow Anchor, the deck doesn't have too many things going for it in pushing for damage. The only reason, really, that my deck loses to it, my True King Dino build, is because if they take my Tyranno, I can't really do much against it because it's my Tyranno. And it's kind of hard to get rid of that guy. He's a 3,500 body. And I personally think if Widowmaker got put to, like, hell, 1, then the deck would see very little play compared to what it sees now, or definitely what it saw quite a while ago. And the deck's been around for a year with only 2 hits on the entire list, and it's probably not going to go anywhere anytime soon with how much Konami seems to love it. So if you want to spend a few $100 building a deck, you can build Striker. Just be warned that unless you have 3 multi-roll in or always being able to draw it or search it, you won't have too much recursion anymore. For our number 1 slot, you can probably already guess it considering it wasn't anywhere else on the list. We have Orchist. So, Orchist, this deck is actually nuts. And let's just say I was very right to put it at number 1 on my top rogue decks for February, because, whoa, this is really awesome. Also, I'm sorry about my dogs you can obviously hear in the background, because this microphone picks up everything. Stop that. Just lay down. Just lay down. Don't you dare start playing in here. Go, out. Now. Out now. This is why I need to keep my door closed. My most sincere apologies. But anyways, back to the number 1 deck. Orchist is nuts. So, even before they got Dingirsu and everything they got in Dark Neostorm to help, this deck was able to do so much. It used to be basically just a Boral Sword dot deck like a lot of decks were, and also an Azathoth dot deck if it had to go first. But now it is evolved into this culmination of a combo and control deck, being able to either go first or go second with very little backlash either way. If it goes first, they can set up a board of few negates with Fog Blades, Orchis Crescendo, and Phantom Knights of Rusty Bardage, and then having a Dingirsu there as well. And if you have Babel on board with that Dingirsu, you can just detach a material to send in a card your opponent controls to grave without targeting on their turn. And that's pretty great. As well, if they're forced to go second, they can just combo off with Neospace Connector to rip your stuff out of your hand, just to make sure you don't have any hand traps to stop them. And then they can likely just kill you with a Boral Sword after sending everything you have to grave. And that is great for a deck to have. And like I said, even before Dark Neostorm, where they got Dingirsu and Orchis Crescendo, this deck was able to do a lot, even after getting Phantom Skyblaster put to 1 on the latest ban list. And really, there's almost nothing that can stop this deck. Their matchups against the other decks on this list are fairly balanced. True King Dinosaur, the only thing they have to worry about is Tyranno flipping their materials face down to where they can't make a mermaid. Because if they can't make a mermaid, they kind of just can't go off. Just know that. Or if they make a mermaid and you hand trap it, then they're kind of just done. And Danger Thunder, they just have to go first. If they go second, that's kind of fine too, as long as they draw into like Fog Blades. They don't search too much, I don't think. Really, it's just a lot of special summoning from deck. Silent Mangrate, they can negate stuff by themselves, they can push through negates, and there's not much to negate other than Mermaid. Sky Striker, they can just stall, like most decks can. This deck is really good, and I remember when this deck kind of relied on Armageddon Knight, back when the entire deck was under like $10. Armageddon Knight getting put to 1 murdered this deck. But then they got a bunch of new support in the OCG, and then they started plowing through the competition. And with most of the cards, other than Dingirsu being at like $40, this deck is surprisingly cheap. Of course, there's the Danger Engine, yeah, but you can always just substitute those dangers for some others. Yeah, it won't be as consistent, but it still works almost exactly the same. So if you have about, I don't know, maybe $200, $300 that you want to spend on a card game, and you want to play one of the top decks, but you don't want to fall into the people that play Striker, then I highly recommend picking up Orchest. Because 2 Dingirsu, $80, everything else other than the Dangers, probably less than like $20. And then you have the Dangers, which, if you put them as a whole, honestly, those are the most expensive when combined, adding up to about almost $200. And other than that, there's not much that can stand in your way from playing this awesome deck. Also, can I just say that Ultimate Rare Galatea is really beautiful. Like, surprisingly beautiful. But anyways, do not skimp on this deck. I told you not to in February, but you really shouldn't now. Orchest is a force to be reckoned with. That about does it for the time we have today. Thank you so much for watching this top 5 list. I know I'm not the most entertaining to listen to, and my editing might not be that great either, but I do really appreciate if you did stay to the end, because it just really means a lot to me, knowing that you actually cared. And if you enjoyed this video, or if you want to see more Yu-Gi-Oh! Content like this, or potentially likely better, check out my channel, and be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications for more great Yu-Gi-Oh! Content such as this. And without further ado, this is Aurora, signing off.